all want to make money by doing something we love. If you could turn your hobby into your job, you'd never work a day in your life, right? Welcome to Hobby Hustle, the ultimate podcast where collecting passion and business collide. Now, here's your host, Zach Nigett.
What is going on, everybody? Welcome to episode 18 of Hobby Hustle. I'm glad you're here today. I'm your host, Zach Nigett. I greatly appreciate you taking time to spend with us. And if this is your first time tuning in, welcome to the show. And if you've been listening for a while, please be sure to rate, subscribe, like us, and of course, share with your friends. Also, if you're watching on YouTube, please leave a comment and any thoughts or suggestions you have. I greatly appreciate your support, and I'm really excited to dive into the show today. Today's guest is a lifelong collector who's passionate about cards, toys, and people in the collectible space. He's evolved from the early days of flipping cards into setting up at shows as a dealer. He then leveraged his design and marketing skills to start to help to promote smaller local shows, eventually growing into being a co-founder and executive director of the Burbank Card Show. At the beginning of 2024, he accepted his current position as the director of dealer relations with Fanatics Events. He has had an incredible run over the past 3 years and is one of the genuine good guys of the hobby. You can find him on IG at dynasty.ej or at Fanatics Events. I'm honored to welcome a passionate collector, entrepreneur, and friend, EJ Ferrer, to the show. EJ, what is up, my man? How are you?
What's going on, Zach? It's been a long time coming, man. Just very, very much happy and humbled to be here.
Dude, I am so excited to have you. Like I said, I'm excited to get into your story, EJ, because you really have an amazing one. But, you know, I know you've got a ton of different collectibles that you're into. So before we get into it, any cool pickups lately?
Man, well, thankfully, shout out to my wife who just texted me. It's calmed down quite a bit, guys. I mean, Fanatics Fest was just such a huge, and again, it's one thing to work for the company and hosting it and all that good stuff. It's another thing when you're walking around and be like, oh, I need that, or I need that. So thankfully my wife got me on cuffs, but at the same time I did pick up, I'm a big Enterbe basketball collector. So I picked up a lot of cool custom pieces that I've got from Hong Kong. And then I picked up that Miles Morales that's right up there. So definitely a big 6-scale figure collector. I'm always down to talk figures, toys. So, but yeah, those are the two notable pickups that I've gotten.
Awesome. Well, congrats. Those sound like amazing pieces. And I'm sure they're posted somewhere that I can see them on your IG feed or something. Right. So, hey, speaking of collecting, you know, I like to take it back to the very beginning with everybody. So can you tell us a little bit of sort of how you got into collecting and what some of those early memories are?
I mean, I always tell the story all the time. Like, everyone has that typical LeBron James 03 story. So I have like a very similar story. Yeah. But I also take it back from when I was like a kid. Well, I was a kid at that time. But I remember my dad taking me to Big Five. This shows my age completely because Big Five, I don't think carries sports cards anymore. I could be wrong. But I remember it was like one of those like repacks, like that has like 100 or 200 random cards. Totally. And I remember my dad who worked at the LAX, he would take me to work at times and I would be in the back seat and I would just read Penny Hardaway. And then on the back, it would say University of Memphis, 6'8", 195. Like I would remember like the players' backgrounds, where they went to college, how much points did they average in 1999? You're familiar with that old ESPN show Stump the Schwab? So
totally.
I was my high school coach used to call me the Schwab because I would know exactly where so-and-so went to college, where it went to high school. Like Zach, like name an NBA player and I'll like kind of give you like
I'll give you one of my boys, Dennis Rodman,
the Worm, right? Yeah. So like, played for the Detroit Pistons, played for the Chicago Bulls, went to a community college.
Yes,
like
he did.
These are things that like not every casual basketball fan knows of. Totally. But like I just randomly know, and it's because of the early memories of just my dad taking me to Big Five and the sporting goods stores and like picking up these $5-10 packs of cards with base cards that probably aren't worth anything.
I'll date myself, EJ. I remember doing that, but at Toys R Us. So we'll go even a step further back. And they had those same types of repacks. I know exactly what you're talking about. But, I think you bring up an interesting point, like from a collector perspective. I miss a lot of those stats and like interesting career stuff on the backs of cards. Like, sure, some of them still have them, but a lot of them don't give the love on the back. And like, I think that we should have a collector's push to bring back the stats.
Yeah, going back to that too, like I remember the days, again, it's a bunch of you and I being old heads, right? But like, I remember the days when you would actually like grab a pack and you're like, yo, if I get a Kobe or if I get a Shaq base card, I'm happy, right? Yeah. And then where it's now like, you know, kids that were 13, you know, they get like a case hit and they're like, it's not good enough. Totally. We're like, with me, like I remember I was such a big fan of Jason Richardson because of his glory days as a slam dunk champion. And I remember me and my cousin pulled a Jason Richardson napkin game worn warm up from Flair Mystique. And I remember I was just like, yo, so hyped. I remember like putting it in those it wasn't even one touches at the time. It was those screw downs.
Oh yeah.
It was the 4 where it was like each corner. Mm-hmm. And I remember me and my cousin like took turns just like looking at it and just like literally this $3 Jason Richardson game worn napkin card.
But that's what it's all about, man. Right? Is like, you know, people get into collecting, not all the time, but like the true collectors are in it for the passion and the love. And it's like, you know, I talked to so many people on this pod and obviously just out and about, but it's like the small items that bring you so much joy. That to me is the coolest stuff. Don't get me wrong. I appreciate grails and I think it's so cool when people show off the big stuff, but it's like, that's not what it's about. That's not what everybody can afford, you know? So it's just cool to be passionate about some of those maybe smaller items and to have those memories. Right. So that's really cool. So, you know, speaking about going from that smaller stuff to grails, obviously you've gotten into toys and you've gotten into some much larger sort of items. Can you talk to us a little bit about sort of how your collections evolved and that whole story?
Yeah. So it was 2018, fast track to 2018. Yeah. I was a big Kobe fan. Of course, I'm from Southern California. Kobe had just recently retired. And I remember it was at the Next Level complex in Garden Grove, which was about like 15 minutes away from my house. And my buddy had a basketball game. And of course, right after that was Kobe and Gianna and their team versus one of my friends' teams, my friend Josh at We Are One Sports. He ran a basketball program there. And Kobe and him knew each other because if you guys know, Kobe is very intense. You guys have heard the stories and have seen Kobe on the court. But my friend Josh was sharing me these stories where like Kobe's also very competitive at anything he does. And Kobe was his daughter's basketball coach. And I remember seeing Kobe and I was just like, you know, and at the time I was in web and in the PT business, primarily working with NFL players. And it was such a not just necessarily lucrative in a sense, but also it afforded me some time to really get back into the hobby that I once loved as a kid. But at this time, it wasn't Jason Richardson that I was searching for. It was Kobe. And I remember there was a Beckett article, and it showed the Kobe checklist. It was the Kobe rookie checklist. Okay, and at the time, there wasn't a sports card investor. There wasn't I believe there's Sports Card Digest. And then there was, of course, the infamous blowout forums, right? But other than that, there really wasn't anything that crazy. I remember there was a guy by the name of PSA Collector who was like a big YouTuber and like maybe a couple others, but like there wasn't really much content within the hobby at the time. And all I remember was like bookmarking this Beckett magazine. So it had the lowest of the low of the Kobe cards, which had, you know, the upper deck base, and it had the Topps 368 base, which is still my favorite card till this day, all the way up to the EX 2000 Kobe, all the way up to a Topps Chrome Refractor Kobe. So I had this checklist and I still have it. I'm looking at my screen right now and I have it up and it has like, okay, this is what it was and this is what it's worth. So I would go to my LCS, which is Average Joe's at the time. Shout out to those guys. And I would pick out Kobe's. I just hoarded Kobe's. I was just, as you could tell by the back of my collection, I'm a hoarder at heart. And I just hoarded everything Kobe. I made sure that if it was like a third year card, I was like, yo, he's wearing the Moon Adidas Kobe's. I need those because I had those when I was a kid. I remember I'd even do things where like, oh, Allen Iverson is guarding him on his card. I need that card. Like, it's like stuff like that. Ultimately, I accumulated over 1,000+ Kobe cards. And not every one of them were valuable at the time. And of course, unfortunately, Kobe passed away, as well as his daughter and amongst others, right? So at the time, I had boxes filled with Kobe cards from just accumulating all of that. And the cards that I had bought for a few dollars on eBay and a few dollars at Average Joe's ended up being worth, 5, 10, some of them even 50x. A lot of these 90s cards that I've accumulated over time became money. And it was just some of those things where, like, at the same time, I didn't necessarily think about this as another form of a 401k or another form of whatever it is. I just was a big Kobe fan. And I realized that and at the time too, I don't know if you remember, the Jordan autos were like maybe $500 at the time, which was absurd for me to spend more than $100 on a card. And there was so much. And if you guys have followed me for a while now, you guys know my good friend Flipstar Pat, and you guys know him and I are very, very tight. And that's how we honestly really got back into it, was that, and this is kind of the same story as everyone else, where that COVID side of the spectrum came in. And Pat, I've known through my cousin, and I had another mutual friend who and at the time too, I ruptured my Achilles. So while things were closing, I was on eBay and I was looking at things and like watching things on YouTube. And then me and my buddies, there were some notable names in our infamous group chat that we had, and it was called Hobby Lobby. Hopefully Hobby Lobby is not watching, but we didn't sell anything out of that Hobby Lobby team. But, like, we were called the Hobby Lobby gang. And I remember, like, looking back at it now, like, we had so much fun. Like, the glory days of that time was so cool to look back on. And I know I'm rambling here, but Kobe was my guy. Yeah. And I remember, like, looking back, Kobe's the reason why I'm here today, is because of that fact that I zoned in on just, let me get as much Kobe as possible. And all that because of that love for collecting and that love for just overall fandom, right? And just being a little bit more obsessed than I should have. And thankfully I listened to my wife, and we're here now.
Yeah. Well, she's like, "Hey, EJ, thin out your Kobe collection." And then you're like, "Okay." And then you went to toys, like, what are behind you, so it's okay.
Yeah. By the way, the toy stuff was a bit easier to get into, right? But I had so many duplicates. Like, at one point, if you guys search, at one point, I had over 55 Kobe 138 Topps rookie cards. And there was a few that were graded. There was a few that wasn't. And at the time too, I was the proud owner of the Pop One PSA 1. And this, I still have it till this day.
Yeah.
But it's something that, like, I'm just a complete weirdo when it comes to collecting. But awesome. My wife was like, "You have so many duplicates of, like, this card. Let's sell it."
Yeah. Totally. Well, I mean, it sounds like you did well for yourself. So I've got to ask, you built up this huge Kobe collection and stuff. Is there any sort of, like, one item out there still that's like your grail, be it Kobe or not? Like, what would be that one thing you're chasing?
Easy answer. It's the Finale Noir Kobe card, where Kobe's looking at the basket and it's kind of to the back of the card.
Yep.
And of course it has the gold signature. That's like the one card that I'm like, okay, this is it. I almost got the card in a deal, but long story short, the seller actually ended up selling it for way more than what I offered, which, again, no hate on that guy for sure. He's one of the best dealers in our industry today. So, but I'm still in the hunt for that card for sure. But if there was another card, another console, I hate to even call it a consolation prize, it'd be the Topps Chrome Refractor Kobe. That's something that I'm looking to really kind of keep within the family forever.
Yeah, cool. Well, I love those. Those are awesome. So let's shift gears a little bit. And, obviously you have this passion for collecting, but you then, turned it into sort of more of a business side. And you've obviously established yourself as a rising star in this collecting community, man. And you weren't always in the high profile position that you're in today. So can you sort of tell us a little bit about how you got into the business side of the hobby?
Yeah, no, by the way, great transition, because it all ties in together, right? So, of course, me, my friends, Pat, Tim, Steven, Goat City, like, we all banded together and we're like, guys, we're going to hit up as much shows as possible. And this is kind of kudos to Coleman's Cards. Coleman's Cards and Sasha T at the time. And a lot of people don't give Sasha a lot of credit. There's a lot of people, a lot of content creators that owe Sasha a thank you.
Totally.
Because Sasha was definitely the pioneer, not just in a sense of content creating, but also just overall business side of the hobby. And that hotbed of the West Coast, which is some of the biggest names now, right? I'm so proud of that, because some of us started in a very small Rundown Shop, right? It's Stephanie Mama Breaks, Juju at Rizzo Sports. Some of us that are now doing great things within the hobby, we were just regular folks that did this on the side.
Yeah.
So me and my buddies, we banded together, and I remember we were just doing all the local shows within Southern California.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember we were just like, yo, let's do Dallas. And I remember Dallas was the Super Bowl for us. Totally. And then it's let's do the National. I remember the National, me and Goat City, Steven, we were the only two that knew each other. And Mojo, shout out Jay Mojo. And those are the only ones. And so happened our friend Mojo is the superstar guy in the industry, right? So we were just the nobodies and just really we're just, and again, it goes back to the love, right? It goes back to just not just the love of just the hobby in general, but also it was just the love for the community, the love for the relationships that we built. There was, if you were to tell me in 2020 that I'd be working at Fanatics, I would probably, number one, I wouldn't even know what to even think, number one, let alone even have a full-time job in this industry is something that is still a dream to me, right? And I don't take that lightly at all. Every day I wake up, I always think about that.
Yeah.
And that transition just went from every deal. I always knew that every deal that I made was another person that I built a relationship with or have a possibility of building a relationship with. So guys that I would always deal with, you talk about Coleman. So Coleman and I would do deals. You would have a deal with this guy. You would have a deal with this girl. You'd have a deal with this person, this company. And then, of course, at Dallas, everyone sees each other every 2 months. So you start to get familiar with everybody. You start to do, you start to go out with people, and you're like, hey, let's go to a Mavs game. And you start to really build these relationships and really cultivate, not just in a sense of us doing transactions together, but also hey, dude, I'm looking for this card. I'm looking for this. Hey, I know you're a buyer at this. Let's do a deal here. And you start to build these relationships. And it goes back to 2021, where it was late 2021. And I had two buddies of mine from college, DJ and Ryan, who actually are ministry workers in Newport Beach. And I remember they vividly told me, we were vividly at a card show. Mm-hmm. I think Jay ran the show, my former business partner with the Burbank card show.
Yeah.
Coast card show. But Jay didn't have AC at the Boys and Girls Club of one of the shows. And by the way, ran a great show, the premier Southern California show. Still till this day, one of the best shows. And I remember there wasn't any AC. My wife was helping me with the booth and she was complaining. And I remember Ryan pulls up, and Ryan, you can't miss Ryan. He's about 6'6" and just a great dude overall. And he was just like, hey, we have this gym at Newport Beach. They have a very beautiful church, literally on the hill of Newport Beach.
Cool.
And they're like, hey, we have this gym. It has AC. It's definitely more higher end as a facility compared to the Boys and Girls Clubs that we were used to. Dude, I remember we had shows at pet stores. That's how crazy it was in Southern California. And all I remember was I was like, nah, I don't know, guys. I'm a dealer. So we ended up meeting at a BJ's in Santa Ana. And I love Pazookies. I love Pazookies. As you guys could tell, it takes a lot to keep this figure that I have. So, I make sure to, stay full.
You got to train hard, man.
You got to train hard, guys. Look, it's not easy, getting to this figure, man. So, I remember I was dumb, and I remember telling these guys, I remember they told me the pitch. It was hey, 80 tables at $80. Let's rock. And I was I remember so scared at not even filling 80. I was so scared at filling 40 tables. And all I remember Ryan was dude, I got you on the meal. And I remember I'm a cheapskate, man. So I'm man, anyone that gets to treat me out, I'm all right, bet. I'll give it a try. So I wasn't really thinking anything of it. I wasn't thinking oh, this would marinate to the Burbank card show. This would marinate to Fanatics. Right. I was just thinking of dude, let me help out my college buddies that are trying to start the show.
Yeah.
And all I remember was I was at a local show, and I remember it was Pat that had asked one of the guys, hey, are you going to the Newport Showcase, which we now still till this day, it's a great show that Ryan and DJ still runs. And I remember the guy was vivid. I remember I keep using the word vividly, but I remember
yeah. It's lodged in there, man.
and the guy was well, I know Dynasty Mode, but I don't really know EJ. And that's one thing about me is if you tell me I can't do something, I'm going to do it.
Yeah.
And a lot of people don't know this. My only background for running events is I used to run skits in college. And I used to throw house parties. That was it. Like,
well, we won't tell Mr. Rubin that, dude. We'll keep it under wraps.
Yeah, I think I had put it in my resume too. But all I remember was like, okay, this is it. Like, I'm gonna go off. I'm gonna ask some of the bigger LA guys that I know, and like, we're gonna fill this to 80 tables.
Yeah.
The next day, which was a Sunday, I remember this so well. My wife is cleaning. I think she's doing laundry, and the laundry's like really loud. And all I remember is I call every single one of my friends who are like LA dealers, and I was like, guys, I need you guys at the show. It would mean so much to me if you guys made it to the show.
Yeah.
And all of them said yes. And mind you, like, it's hard to trust someone who, number one, it's a new show.
Yeah.
Number two, it's a buddy of yours that has never done a card show. And all I remember is that 3 weeks later, we ran a show of over 120 dealer booths. Wow. And it was one of the best shows looking back. It was like, not just in a sense of the buy, sell, and trade side, which of course it happened. All I remember was seeing Rizzo Sports Jeff pulling up and buying a Mickey Mantle. And I'm like, who buys a Mickey Mantle at a local church show? You know, like, all I remember was just having a good time. And just, and then also kudos to my other partner, DJ. DJ brought in his parents who also cater. So we brought in Filipino food, we brought in lumpia, we brought in beefsteaks, and man, it was just such a great time. And of course, one thing that I'm known for, not just with the Newport Showcase, but also at Burbank, is I would take the mic and I would just, start roasting all my dealer friends and like talking about Pat. I'm like, look, guys, it's Pat, and it's like hundreds of people that would look up and be like, yo, they're all looking at Pat. And be like, let's sing Pat a happy birthday, even though it's not Pat's birthday. Totally. And so it's like things like that like definitely you can't get away with at Fanatics Fest, but it was like things like that like just ultimately was a vibe. Like it was ultimately like, hey, like we want it to be welcoming. We don't want this to be that typical card show where like no one talks to anyone or like no one says hi. Like I wanted to make sure that, and this also kind of translates to Burbank and Fanatics Fest. Mm-hmm. Like we wanted it to be very, very welcoming. We want it to be very much like, hey, who do you collect? Oh, you collect Lakers? Oh, dude, like, let's start your Laker collection. Like, I don't want it to be very alienated. I don't want it to be very, because you and I both know we've been to card shops. We've been to card shows where we're just like, okay, I guess I'm just going to have to go to In-N-Out now and just, it's a good Saturday. And that was something that I took on from different things, right? Yeah. So ultimately that was the, how I personally got into it, like as a collector and as a dealer. Yeah. And then to kind of leave a cliffhanger, and then we'll get to how we got to Burbank. All I remember was before I took on Newport, I called Jay. Yeah. And I remember asking Jay, and this is like a big part of where we are at today, is I remember asking Jay about this opportunity. And I was like, hey, Jay, I always tell people Jay's the big brother I never really wanted. But I was really tight to Ken, his son, who was an assistant for a few years. And by the way, keep an eye out on Ken. Ken's doing incredible work.
Ken's doing amazing stuff, man.
And all I remember was telling Jay, and for like 30 minutes, he's like yelling at me, telling me how it's a bad idea. And he's like, yo, running card shows is hard, and you have to deal with all this stuff that's going on behind the scenes, like stuff that I know you can't do. But then after the 30 minutes, he goes, but if you want to do it, I'll support you. And that meant so much to me, just off of the sense that this was someone who was an OG in our industry, number one, who was considered someone that people trust, number two, not necessarily liked, but it was someone that like, what you're going to get when you get with Jay. And that was something that like, I very much appreciated. Until this day, like it was something that ultimately became, and we look back as, wow, EJ could now do Newport. Let's see if we could bring EJ along and be a part of this journey for Burbank.
Yeah, it's incredible. And I think, one of the things that stands out to me about all this, EJ, and we'll get into where you're at today, but you and I met at a Dallas show years back. We've built a relationship, seeing each other through the hobby, stuff like that. Every interaction I've had with you has always been this awesome, positive vibe, right? But to what you're saying about, you're scared to death filling 40 tables, how are you going to do 80? But it was all about the relationships. That is why that is like one of your superpowers. You are a people person. You are outgoing. You're welcoming. You care. And you're like such an integral part of this community, man. So huge props to you for that. And I just think, that's such a big reflection of, and part of the reason why you are where you're at today, right, is because you have all those qualities. You care. You've built these relationships, and people trust you through that, and that's just so important for people to understand. And I was actually it's funny. I was doing some Facebook deals and stuff and literally chatting with people, and they're like, oh my God, dude, like, you get back to me right away. And, like, you're really good about shipping. I'm like, this whole thing is built on your reputation. Like, sure, we all want to make some money and stuff, but it's more about like building that relationship. So like you said, when you need something, or, there's something you're trying to track down, you have people to reach out to that network, right? Like leverage your network, let your network help you grow. So again, man, props to you for just being an amazing person, and also really just, helping elevate a lot of other people in the space, with you.
I'll even add to that. I got that from my dad. Like my dad played basketball in the Philippines professionally.
Very cool.
And dude, he's in the other room just resting right now, but he's like 66, 6-pack. We were at the gym together this morning. This man lives, eats, sleeps basketball. Like he watches basketball nonstop.
Yeah.
I remember just like he lived in Carson, California, which is the other city next to Long Beach. And all I remember was like going to a local convenience store and people would be like, hey, where's Coach at? Like his name was Coach. And my dad was just such a intricate part. And like, I kind of got that from him. And then like, I kind of took bits and pieces of other people and other mentors of mine. And the one big bro that I have in mind is Mark, Ultimate Pastimes. And you guys know Ultimate Pastimes.
Oh yeah. Mark's amazing.
Legend. And all I remember was like the biggest advice I got from Mark was treat people like gold. You never know. And it's not necessarily in a sense of like, I know what I'm going to get out of Zach in the future. I know what I'm going to get out of, EJ in the future. It's just more of like, you have no idea what people are going through, and just treat them like gold. Right. I mean, look, not every relationship is going to mature. Not every relationship is good. My dad, I can't think of people that could say anything bad about it, but I'm sure with me, I'm sure there's mixed feelings. But you're not going to please everybody in this industry. Right. You're not going to please everybody here and there. But I always tell folks is, man, every situation, any way that you could do to help, and just whatever you believe in, whatever religion you believe in, just know that reciprocates way back more than what you put into it. So that's really who I got it from. There's not a sense of like a secret formula to this. And I think that's the biggest thing too, is like we see how people build relationships, and it's not organic at all. It's very like businessy. It's not a word, but it's not intentional. Like I get it all the time on LinkedIn where it's like, hey EJ, like this and that. And like, it's funny because like when I was at Burbank, it was like crickets, but now here, it's like, oh wow. Like, but all that to say this is that natural progression to anything, including relationships, is the key here. Yep. And I always tell people your network is your net worth, and vice versa. And it's not who you know, it's who knows you. And that goes back to even our relationship, right? Where like you and I remember when the market movers, you guys had that market movers set up in front of the Dallas card show entrance. Yeah. Every time be like, yo, Zach, like, you and I are both tired as
you can do whatever you want, EJ, man. It's open forum.
You know how it is, man. Like, you're like, yo, you're just going through the motions. It's Saturday. It's literally like Saturday afternoon. And you're like, dude, like I've been here for 2 days. Like, let's rock this and that. But it's like, like that one pat is like, yo, let's keep going. Ultimately, like that's like building these relationships is so strong. And that's kind of why I'm.
Yeah. That's where you are, man.
There it is. So
yeah, absolutely. Well, so speaking about strong relationships, you'd mentioned Jay, and people obviously know Burbank Sports Cards, and Rob has a little part of that whole business. But talk to us about sort of that Burbank show, right? And like how you took it from, these smaller Newport showcases, all this stuff, you start talking to Jay, there's an opportunity with Rob, like just let us know about sort of that evolution.
Yeah. So a lot of people don't know this, but like I didn't know Rob before Burbank Card Show.
Okay.
No idea. We had no relationship whatsoever. Of course, he would see me at the shop because I would do deals with Ryan, and everyone did deals with Ryan. You guys know how it is. And you never do deals with Rob. You do deals with Ryan and Ray. That was it. Yeah. Little secret ski for you guys there. But all I remember was I remember the call vividly. Jay calls me and he goes, hey, I have this opportunity. I don't know where it is. And at the time, I already moved to Vegas. Okay. And my goal was to get into the wrestling industry. That's an exclusive, by the way. I don't think I've ever said that on a podcast.
That's really cool.
So I had left the agency business, the web and SEO side of things. Just overall, just did everything that I could in there. I was like, and you know how it is, Zach. Like, you did everything you could in different journeys, and you decide, you know what, I think it's time to pivot. I ended up moving to Vegas with my wife. And just we're like, let's take a 6-month break and let's figure it out. Let's start, figuring out things, and maybe things will progress from there. And I was really trying to get my foot in the door with a wrestling company. And I had a buddy who had reached out to me about that opportunity. So I remember I was going to fly out to meet with the company at hand. And all I remember is I get a call from Jay. And Jay was like, hey, I don't know what this situation is. All I know is that I know you run Newport, I run Premier. Rob wants to figure out something. So he's like, hey, I'm gonna get you linked up with Rob. And I'm like over here, and again, I think of Rob as what I see him on Instagram, this charismatic, crazy,
totally
old man who's just like, what is he talking about? Right. So I get a call, Burbank number, and it's Rob. He goes, hey, buddy. It's Rob Ferris from the Burbank Card Show. And all I remember was the dude who's on my screen is literally this guy. And may I say, if you guys never met Rob, he's literally who he is on social media.
100%. He's amazing. Dudes. Yes.
There is no one else. I will fight this till the death of me. There is no one else that loves this hobby more than Rob Ferris. No one else. Agreed. So Rob goes, hey, can we meet? At the time, I don't think he knew I lived in Vegas at the time, but this was also that same time that my wife and I were doing Southern California, Vegas. It's about 3.5 hours away, driving distance. So we're like, you know what, let's make it a weekend trip. Let's go. I meet with Rob and Jay, and all I remember was Rob was like, hey, I want to do a monthly show at the Elk Lounge. And I was like, Elk Lounge? If you guys aren't familiar with the Elk Lounge, that's where your grandmas and grandpas.
Totally, we've got one up in my town, so that's
exactly.
funny.
So no disrespect to all the elderly.
Totally.
But all I remember was I had my laptop, and I was like, "Hey, Rob, give me an hour. I'll come back. Let me figure out something." So I kind of pulled Jay aside, and I'm like, "Hey, I think we could do much bigger than an Elk Lounge. I'm not really too fond on driving back and forth from Vegas to do a show.
Hang out at the Elk Lounge.
And whatever story it is, I'll say this, whatever story it is, because I know the story gets mixed up and Jay gets mixed up and Rob gets mixed up. This is the story, guys. So I had a pitch deck from a prior client. And this was a pitch deck that I had took from Chris Doe at The Future. If you guys are design guys, you guys know of The Future channel on YouTube. And shout out to my guy Matthew and Cena, big time guys in the design world. And all I remember was I had this pitch deck as a template. Mm-hmm. And I had used it previously for a client that ultimately didn't work out. So what I did was I literally changed the wording to card show. I literally changed it to, and I remember it now. It was an idea to do a South by Southwest type of event for which is pretty much Fanatics Fest now, but ultimately it was a smaller scale where it was very much conscious of that brand. And all I remember was I was telling Rob, I put the names of the companies that we had wanted for the show. And I was like, look, this is the show. 300 tables, best of the best dealers, invite only. And I had PSA, I had eBay, I had Nike, and then I had one other company. I forgot. I'm blanking on this company. Yeah. Well, all I remember was I have no relationships at PSA. I have no relationships at eBay. I have relationships at Nike at the time, still do to this day. And then I forgot the fourth company, but all I remember was just it was Beckett. I had no relationships at Beckett. So I was like, okay, well, this is it. We're going to have a new show here in Southern California, and it's going to be called the Burbank Showcase. And all I remember was Rob was like, I don't like the Burbank Showcase. Let's call it the Burbank Card Show. and all I remember was Rob was like, how much is this going to cost? And the number in mind that was a BS number to me was $100,000. I'm like, $100,000. And Rob thought about it and he was like, oh, that's a lot. So he talked to Steve, and a lot of people don't know Steve, his father, is the real card father.
He's a real goat. Yeah.
He's the real goat. And Steve's very good with money. He's incredible. And that's kind of where Ryan gets it from, right? And I remember Steve was like, he looked at us and Steve was like, don't mess this up and don't lose us any money. And Rob was like, look, if you don't lose us any money, you got a deal. And this is kudos to Rob. Rob basically allowed me to structure the partnership and allowed me and Jay to pretty much lead the show. And Rob would just be the face, and Rob would also just, have the Burbank brand behind it. So this is also a big kudos to Jay. Jay's the ultimate ops guy. He knows how to get things done on an operationals level and an overall opulence level and a location level. And he was able to lock in the Burbank Marriott, which is about 5 minutes away from the shop. And that's all Rob really asked for, was that first show to be at Burbank, California, because there wasn't a show in Burbank. So all that to say this, it was a year of planning. And I was like, well, we need to announce this before the year ends. And it was New Year's Eve. And shout out to John. If you guys don't know John is a big part of the Burbank family. I'm blanking out this dude's name. I know his Instagram handle is brand new now, but if you guys know Tall John, you guys know Tall John. So John ends up giving me the Burbank card show handle because he had started one already. Okay. And he goes, hey, go wild. And all I remember was like, yo, I got to come up with something that is a cliffhanger, but also not too long.
Right.
And all I remember was I was sitting down in the living room and my wife was making something that had something with a ticking sound.
Okay.
So it was like a ticking sound, like a ticking time bomb type of sound. And I was watching something on TV and I was just like, that's it. So I did a ticking sound that was like, okay, Epicenter card show. And then it said ding, Burbank card show coming soon, Q3 2022.
Yeah. I actually remember that reel, EJ.
The reception for that. And again, that's like the agency in me, right? Like that's the Wyatt Kennedy, that's the, the Coltrane's of the world, of running the Jeff Staples of the world. So I kind of took the marketing of like what I've known from the streetwear side and also on the sports side, the Nike side, the John Jay side of things. These are all like design. And I'm a design nerd, by the way. So like these are the guys that I'm like thinking of. And I'm just like, yo, like how would these guys launch a Jordan shoe? What would Tinker Hatfield do on the design side? And then ultimately what would H do on a marketing relations side, right? So like, that's literally what I did. I treated this like it was Fanatics Fest. I treated this like it was the Super Bowl. I treated this like, because that's what God had put in front of me at the time, was this opportunity where looking back at it now, it's like, it's a much smaller show footprint than what Burbank is now. But like, that was it was a cliffhanger. And that was incredible. And I had Rob literally the next day. Happy New Year, guys. You guys saw the announcement. You guys know how Rob is. And ultimately we were there. And I could relate more.
That's awesome, EJ. The best part I like about that story is I've had Jay on the pod and he was like, EJ put together some presentation that he pulled out of his ass. And, he had Nike on there and he had, so I love that this comes full circle. So, while your version might not be the same as Jay's, and you say yours is definitive, they're very similar. So that's good. You guys are at least all telling a similar story.
Yeah. No, Jay's older than me, so I'll give him the kudos on that front. But yeah, I mean, leading up to that, man, I mean, it was some of the craziest journey. I mean, I remember Mint Collective when it first started, and shout out to Ezra and Marino, man. I mean, just that was I think a lot of people don't give the Mint Collective a lot of credit. That was like the area for me to really shine and really try to get as much corporate level communication with this. And man, when I tell you I struck out so many times, Zach, I struck out. I made sure like, and Rob starting to get all fidgety, and he was like, dude, I thought I've known this guy for 20 years. Like, and then ultimately, like, look, it's a new show. It's one of those things to where it's not just a new show, it's a new company. It's new this, new that. And all I remember was like, I started to get really, really down on myself a little bit, just because like, dude, like, I thought that this was going to be this. And that's one thing for show promoters. Like I tell people all the time, like, be very proud on what you're doing. Like, be very proud on being the host of the Hobby Hustle. Be very proud of what you're doing, regardless of it's 20 tables, regardless of it's Fanatics Fest, regardless if you just started becoming a dealer and you're moving value boxes all the way to 7 figures worth of inventory. Be very proud of yourself, your team, and just be very much just very zoned in on where you're at now, because that ultimately multiplies through consistency and sweat equity. Yeah, and I think that's where I was. As I remember, I was in the hotel, and all I remember was I was telling my buddies that, like, guys, this is the hardest thing I've ever done in my life. And mind you, there wasn't any sort of financial like commitment to this. There wasn't any outside of our deposit in the hotel. Yeah. There wasn't any sort of like, I'm going to make a ton of money in this. It was just more so I was so proud of the fact of what we were doing and that problem that we had in Southern California where there wasn't really a big show. There wasn't anything that was worth really folks flying into. And I had that vision of like, well, not everyone could make it to Dallas. Not everyone could make it to the National. Let's build something here in the West Coast. And Jay had that same conviction. Rob especially had that conviction. And all I remember is we just kept pushing. We just kept pushing. We just kept pushing. And man, may I say, dude, that was like, till this day, I look back at that, and that was the greatest show. Like, it was the greatest card show ever. It was incredible. Like, fire marshal code and all that.
I remember seeing I couldn't make it out, which I'm really bummed, but like the vibes, the lines, the FOMO, right, that was created online because there's like so many people trying to get in there that couldn't. Like, you guys did a heck of a job with that, man.
Yeah, man. And again, like, that's something that like I'll share this with you. Like, I remember I stayed that extra Monday just to make sure everything was okay. And Jay did as well. And all I remember, man, I mean, I just cried, bro. I just cried. Like, I bawled it out. And I was just like, man, I want everyone to feel this one day, this feeling of success and the feeling of just like, wow, we did it. Right. Like, because I knew that we had arrived. Right. And like, Rob could have trusted anybody. Rob could have trusted anyone because there was other show promoters out there. And I know that, and I don't blame Rob for this, but like, he could have gotten other guys that had done shows for years. Cause you hear it all the time where it's like, I've been doing shows for 12 years. I've been doing shows for 30 years. I'm like, I did one Newport show. I'm here. So
I got Nike, Beckett, PSA.
Yeah, I still don't know what I'm doing. But like, I mean, and it goes to Jay too. Like, he trusted me with this. And like, till this day, man, those guys are family, man. I mean, it's like one of those things where it's one thing to do business with other people. It's one thing to do business with people that actually have the same vision as you. And that was something that we, till this day, man, like, I'll be telling my grandkids, like, however many times Burbank and West Coast Card Show changes their names, it will forever be the Burbank Card Show to me. And just, I'm just so grateful of everyone that has supported. And you guys know how it became now.
Well, I think it's awesome. And I think, as far as just like inspiration, that story is so cool. But I think really what's important, and I was just talking last week with Tim from Slabstrong, and like one of his big messages was like, just do it. Like, put yourself out there, and like, to your point, like, you were like, I'm going to do it. I will figure it out. I'm going to put myself out there. I'm going to say I can do it. And you figured out the way to do it. And had you not, like, your story would be probably totally different. And listen, I love you, EJ. I don't know if you'd be at the same place you are today, right? So it's like you took that leap of faith, you believed in yourself, right? Because you had that pride and that drive, and you made it happen, man. And that's really just, it's so cool, man. It's so cool to see that. So let's talk about that though, man. You go from, dealer flipper into small show promotion into the Burbank show, which, as you said, grew exponentially very quickly. But then all of a sudden, at the beginning of 2024, you're hired to become the director of dealer relations for Fanatics Events. Like, how did that come about? And just sort of tell us a little bit about that story.
So I remember it so well. Like, I do everything else. I felt like there's a vividly but all I remember is I was at Dion's show in Northern California. Shout out to the Card Addict 232 show. And all I remember is I get a text from I forget who it was. It's like, hey, did you see Fanatics is now getting into the event industry? And I was like, oh, wow, that's really cool. And usually for me, whenever I hear something within the hobby, whether good or bad, I'm very tunnel vision, especially with Anaheim was the big part of my life. And also, I'll park there real quick. I used to sneak into shows at the Anaheim Convention Center. My first card show was the National in 2006 with my dad. And all I remember was like, it was such a momentum and a monumental moment for me to do a show at the Anaheim Convention, an area where like I grew up in. This was a dream come true. So I was still very tunnel visioned, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, oh, cool. Like, they're bringing in Lance Fensterman, who, at the time I didn't know who he was. And all I remember was I reached out to Pat, who's a big Comic-Con guy.
Yeah.
And I was like, hey, who's this Lance Fensterman dude? And Pat was like, dude, he's like the comic king. I mean, the Comic-Con wizard. He's the guy, he's a visionary. He's the godfather behind Comic-Con. And his vision for shows, not just Comic-Con, but also many other shows, Star Wars Celebrations. He ran Reed Pop for years, as well as my manager, our SVP, Mike Armstrong. They did incredible work, not just on a sense of the prestige of shows that they've done, but just overall bringing people and congregating people into one roof, right? So all I remember was I was thinking to myself, I'm like, wow, that's really awesome. Like, I'm really wishing the best for Fanatics, because at the time I already had friends that worked at Fanatics, and of course Fanatics Collectibles was just kind of starting up. So I was like, dude, like, that'd be awesome. Like, maybe like we'll cross paths and figure it out. And of course I get to meet Lance himself. And long story short, I just really like he told me his spiel of like what his vision was, and just it resonated with my vision. And same with Mike Armstrong, who told us the same vision once again. It was like, wow, like, I don't know what it is. Like, I can't necessarily touch it. I can't see it on the internet.
Totally.
And all I remember was like Lance had asked me like, hey, like, what are some of like your reasonings behind doing this? Or what are you, because Lance is a very, very much a strategic guy. Where like, he's like, why did you do this? Like, why are you doing the hobby hustle? Like, he's very much that. And Lance like asked me, I remember I was like, yo, I read this book, because again, like when I'm doing these shows, there wasn't really a how to run a card show YouTube video. There wasn't really a how to promote, and it wasn't just a card show necessarily. It was like how to run a convention
event, man. Yeah.
And till this day, there isn't much, right? And all I remember is I went to Amazon and I read this book. I bought this book and I read this book, and it was like the whole story of Comic-Con. And just, I was so enamored by that whole story of just how it ended up being a hotel convention show, or not even a convention, a hotel hallway show, into now becoming San Diego Comic-Con, into now becoming New York Comic-Con.
And
just like seeing all the festivals that's happened beyond that. And all I remember was like, that is my vision. And that is something that I want to accomplish, because that's never been done. And it goes back to the Newport days where that one guy was like, hey, EJ, you can't do it. And I was like, dude, like,
I can.
Yeah. And all I remember was like, hey, of course, I realized that Burbank was not going to be that. And again, look, Rob and Jay and that team are doing great work. They're really trying to build the card show of the West Coast, and they're really, really trying to build something great there. And I know they're going to do great things, and they've already been doing great things. The rebrand was a great idea, thank God. But overall, like, they had a different vision than what I had. Ultimately, that vision that I had became something much greater. And that was something that I was like, you know what? If there was a chance for me to join Fanatics Events, like, it would be very much like I'm gonna do whatever I can to get in there and make it happen. Yep. And at the time, there wasn't anything else. And I remember I'd like just kind of keep still. Of course, I had already announced me resigning from Burbank. So of course, with that, and I'll kind of like park there too. Like, I did not expect the amount of just love and support from the hobby. It goes back to what we had talked about, where the relationships, the 100%. Amount of people that reached out to me personally, Zach, like, meant so much to me, meant so much to my career. Just the companies that reached out and was like, you know what, like, if you're interested, like, we'd love to discuss and speak. Yeah. and figure out ways to, and at the time I didn't really know what I was going to do. I mean, quite frankly, Zach, I was trying to get into the toy industry. I've always been one. I'll keep it 1,000 with you, Zach. Like, I get bored really easily, and I was just like, well, I felt like I've accomplished so much at Burbank. Like, maybe it's time, and maybe it's God's calling for me to get into another industry. And I remember I had met a buddy of mine who was getting into the art toy world, and we had a resource there to get some things done. Of course, I had networks of different artists that we could potentially work with, and I was just like, dude, I think I'm doing this.
Yeah.
And all I remember was I get a call, and that call was enough for me to realize that calling of staying in the event space and staying within the hobby and serving the hobby community, of creating something that has never been done.
Yeah.
And that calling came in, and it was the call that I remember pretty much changed the trajectory of ultimately my career. And that's something that I think a lot of people don't know about. That is, like, they just think of, like, how did EJ get here? Right? How did EJ become what he is today? When in reality, like, people don't know that even EJ didn't know how I got here. And all I remember was, like, I look back at just the consistency and just, like, the tunnel vision where A company said no, well, B company said yes, let's go.
Yep.
Like, that's always been the thing from Newport to Burbank. Newport didn't even have a sponsor. Burbank, our first show, we had 4 sponsors. When I left Anaheim, we had 40 plus sponsors at the show.
Yeah,
and that was something I was so proud of. And just, okay, what's the next play? And I got the call, and that was something that, looking back, it was the best decision I ever made, because I knew there was other options out there for sure. But I knew that if I joined Fanatics, I would be with the best of the best.
100%.
I would be, every day would be a different day, Zach. Like, I would learn from a Lance Fensterman who's done this for 20 plus years. I'm learning this from a Mike Armstrong who himself has done so many great things with Star Wars Celebrations and other great shows within that Reed Pop area. Right. And, like, I'd learn. And at the time, our team was small. I remember I was like one of the first guys that wasn't from Comic-Con and Reed Pop. And looking back, our team has grown exponentially because of the growth that we've had. And also, of course, it helps that I'm a big wrestling fan. So WWE World was also a big part of our year this year. But just overall, what I'm trying to say is I knew that I had options out there where I could be the guy. And I had options out there where, like, not just, and again, I'm not even stemming on it on a financial level. I'm thinking about this more so like, how can I contribute? Right. And this was an opportunity for me for not only to contribute, but also to kind of take a step back and learn from these folks and my teammates and my team and the people that I know have done incredible things. And I could learn so much more beyond just what I've known, because I think that's the biggest thing when development that I think a lot of people don't really talk about is that area of, I need to get better. I need to get better at communicating. I need to get better at Zoom calls. I need to get better at closing. I need to get better at this. I need to get better at that. And ultimately, man, it's approaching 1 year here at Fanatics. And this 1 year has been such an incredible year of growth for me that I'm just so thankful to be here. Right. And I think a lot of people could look at it 2 ways, where it's like, oh, how do I level up? How do I become a VP? How do I become this? How do I become that? Or, like, to me, I kind of have that same mindset of, yes, I mean, look, I long to do great things beyond just what I'm doing now, but I'm so locked in on just that same mentality that I had at Newport, that same mentality that I had at Burbank. And ultimately, I know that in reality, I need to change some things here. I need to change some things there. But ultimately, the mindset stays the same, where I just got to lock in. I just got to work on really providing the best fan experience possible and the best experience for everyone within the hobby. And ultimately, that's my goal.
Yeah. Well, I think it's awesome, EJ. And I think, you again hit on a really important topic, which is that self-growth, and surrounding yourselves where, you had grown the Burbank show, right? And obviously learned a ton and did well, but, like, you were willing to, and it was okay to be sort of the small fish in the big pond again. Right. And, like, what that's going to do for you and being able to be mature enough to like understand that, to be like, hey, you know what? Like, I won't be the top dog. Like maybe I don't make all the decisions, but like I'm surrounding myself with greatness, and that greatness is going to only make me better. And by me being better, I'm going to only make the team better. And I think that, listen, we're in a world of influencers and content creators and all this stuff, and that's wonderful, but there's a lot of ego. So it's refreshing to hear, somebody say, hey, I'm willing to take the back seat, and I'm willing to, say, okay, cool. Like, I don't know everything. Like, let me learn, let me be better, and I will grow with you. So props to you for taking that approach, man. That's really cool and really exciting.
Yeah. Sure.
Real quick, you said that, every day is different, all this stuff. I don't want to spend a ton of time, but just tell the audience a little bit sort of like what your day-to-day looks like. And, really, obviously you have this title, Director of Dealer Relations, but what does that like sort of mean for you from a, work perspective?
Yeah. And I'll even take a quick backtrack. Like on the flip side of that, there was a lot of trust with Lance and Mike as well. Like there was that notion of, okay, well, EJ ran Burbank, so let's build around what worked there. And EJ, you lead us on that front on the dealer side as well as the card show side. So there was a lot of that entrepreneurial side that comes in from Michael Rubin all the way down to myself, where it's like, hey, like it goes back to, I remember when I first started here, and all I remember was like, hey, how are we going to do this? And I remember it was like, yo, but you're the director. You should probably start. And it shows how green I was in the corporate space, right? So, but ultimately, like, it's a lot of that. It's a lot of trial and error. It's a lot of really building a system. I think a lot of people don't understand that notion and most of these systems need to be updated. A lot of these systems have been staying here. And I'm not talking about Fanatics. I'm talking about just in general at other companies or other card shows or other events where it's very systematic. It's very like, oh, well, so-and-so's here, so-and-so's here. But in reality, there's no growth. And without growth, there's no business. So that's kind of and I'll jump into the day-to-day was like, I used to think of it as show by show. It's like the same kind of notion as paycheck to paycheck, where in reality, you're not supposed to look at it from a paycheck to paycheck perspective or a show to show perspective. You got to look at it from a year to year perspective or even years to years perspective, where it's like, all right, well, we have to figure out this show, this location, but then how does our location year of calendar look for 2025 and 26 and 27? That's how we kind of own into things, is like what makes sense overall for the business, right? So, and to jump into the day-to-day side, of course, Fanatics Collect Orlando coming up. So it's a lot of day-to-day of really building our comps with our dealers, really getting into the weeds of things. Shout out to our team for doing a great job of really kind of building it out. This dealer roster that we've built out throughout the year has been incredible. So just from regardless of what level of dealer you are, whether you've been doing this for years, whether you're doing it for months, we want to make sure we reach out to you. We want to make sure that we built this relationship with you, and we want to make sure that we take care of you as a vendor of ours, as a dealer of ours. So there's a lot of communications on that. There's a lot of building the marketing aspect of it and making sure that our marketing team is in line with some of the stuff that we're doing, not just for the sense of WWE World, but also for Fanatics Fest and of course, Fanatics Collect Orlando. So there's a lot of communication. There's a lot of different meetings that come to play. And also now with the end of 2024, we're already planning Fanatics Fest. So there's a lot of early communications with internally, also externally with our different divisions as to what we could get done. As to what we can get done and what we can't get done, what makes sense for us, what makes sense on a standpoint of business, and what makes sense on a standpoint for our guests, right? So there's many different things. And again, not every day is the same. There's a lot of things that we're working on here. But if there was something that is a day-to-day for us, is calls, emails, making sure that we're on top of things, making sure we reach out to this dealer. Hey, look, let's collaborate on this. Let's work on this. Let's work with our Tops Direct accounts, who are some of the biggest shops and the best shops in the world that have great branding, have great notoriety. How do we build up a relationship with them to ultimately spread more information about the show, ultimately to get more ticket sales? There's many different ways of collaboration in this industry, as you know, Zach. So that's kind of the day-to-day as of recently. And of course, tragically with the hurricanes that's been going on, it's kind of slowed us down a little bit, but definitely reaching out to the different shops. Hey, are you okay? Is there anything that we could do for you? Is there different things that we could work on to better build a relationship together? And again, not every dealer, not every connection is going to be warranted or necessarily be happy about different results, right? You can't make everybody happy, but that's one thing that we want to take pride in here at Fanatics Events, is not just for the sake of, oh, we're Fanatics, we could do this or we could not do this. I want to be able to say like, hey, at the end of the day, like EJ picked up the phone, Zach picked up the phone, Drew picked up the phone. Shout out Drew, who's on our team. So like, there's many different things that like ultimately we want to accomplish on a P&L standpoint, but these are different things that we can or cannot control and cannot control. And I think that's kind of where we're at here, is let's kind of keen onto our strengths and lean onto what we can control. And that is communication. We need and especially in the event industry where you could never over communicate in this industry, right? Hey, Zach, you can't bring this four-wheeler. You can't bring this. You can't bring that. Like, there's many different things that you could ultimately, and there, again, like I said before, there's no YouTube channel. There's no class that can tell you what you can't do and what you can do in the card industry or even in the card show world of running shows. But the one thing that you can do, and this is prevalent to every industry, is communication.
Yep.
And that's what we're very key on, because ultimately we need to build these relationships with our dealers, because that will carry on to 25 and for years to come.
100%. Well, I think it shows you care. I unfortunately could not make it to Fanatics Fest, it looked amazing. I heard it was a huge success, but to your point, and shout out to you and the team, man. One thing that I did hear was that, during the show, after the show, you guys were going out, you were taking the time to go talk to the dealers. What could we do better? What worked well for you? What didn't work well for you? That goes a long way, man. That goes back to the relationship building. That goes to showing you care. And that goes, like you said, don't take it for granted that you have the huge Fanatics logo on your chest. That, that matters. Yes. But the fact that you guys are putting in that work and you're trying to do the best for these dealers to show up and then make sure that experience is great for them, as well as obviously the attendees, that's huge, man. So tell us a little bit. Obviously, like I said, New York was Fanatics Fest. That was quite the extravaganza. Not that Fanatics Collect Orlando will not be amazing, but it's going to be a different experience. So can you talk to us a little bit about like what that expectation should be for dealers and attendees?
Yeah, and I'll park at Fanatics Fest real quick.
Yeah,
it goes back to that vision that Lance had and Michael Rubin had and our team had. And dude, I remember it was like, you guys seen that meme where like the guy is like, digging and he's just digging and he's digging. You're like, yo, like, I don't know what the hell to expect, but like, hey, we're close. Man, I mean, I was so proud of our team, just so proud of what we accomplished at Fanatics Fest. So proud of my fellow coworkers in other divisions that stepped it up big. Just really proud. AG, shout out AG. You guys know AG very well. Oh, yeah. She has an incredible story into herself. And I think you look back at that and you think of the word collaboration. You think of the word of teamwork and really kind of staying together and having each other's backs. Dude, that plane ride from Vegas to NYC a week before the show was the hardest plane ride I've ever had in my life. I mean, dude, I was sweating. I was like, oh man, I need a nap. Like, I was like, yo, like and when I tell you, man, like it was Thursday night. I just knew it was gonna be a slam dunk. Yeah. It was going to be a slam dunk just because, like, man, I just saw how people came in. And, man, big shout out to all of our dealers that have trusted us with the show. Because, again, look, like, price point is one thing. It's another thing for trust, right? Yeah. Into trusting you to get time off of your shops and your jobs, and to trusting us to go to NYC and trusting our platform. That means so much to me. And even then, like, with everyone, the kudos that we were getting and all the thank yous that we were getting, we wanted to make sure to kind of lean on the folks that had feedback, the folks that had different critiques that, may or may not be something that we implement, but at the same time, it's something that we want to hear from everyone. We wanted to make sure that, hey, look, if that's something that we could easily fix, let's knock it out, right? And kudos to our team for even getting to that Monday after the show is like, hey, look, these are some things that we need to work on. These are some things, let's lean on this strength. Let's lean on this together and figure it out, and ultimately try to build things to create a better show for everyone else. But dude, it was incredible, man. I mean, look, I'm still smiling, man. I'm still thinking about it, dude. That, like, man, like, I'm excited for next year, bro. I'm just happy to be here, man. Like, it goes back. I remember you said it where, dude, that Fanatics on your chest and that Fanatics that F logo, man, it means so much to me just being a part of this team. I'm just so grateful and thankful because, like Rob at Burbank, like, man, they could have chose anybody else to run this, right? And the fact that I was responsible for a third of that show was something that, man, I did not take lightly. I was just very grateful of everyone for being there, and just I remember at the end, man, I gave Lance a big hug. And I remember Lance told me we changed the game. And I remember just thinking to myself, I'm like, man, this dude could have trusted anybody. And honestly, I was the left field choice for this job. A lot of people thought, oh, wow, no brainer. And you're like, oh, wow, EJ's great, this and that. But I never took that to my head. I always thought about definitely thought about some other options in line that they could have had. But I think ultimately, man, they saw the hunger that I had, and they saw the fact that I was very much willing to go above and beyond. And I think that's the biggest thing that ultimately made Fanatics Fest successful. Is it wasn't just me, it was our team that went above and beyond. Totally. Regardless of title, regardless of division, regardless of what it was, we all took a step back and we're like, you know what, let's roll up our sleeves and let's get it done. I mean, if you saw the top stage, that was something that again, kudos to my coworker Cody, who runs all of our talent management side. He called me and he was like, yo, I need you to lead this top stage. And one of my coworkers, Nels, who is our content coordinator, she ran it so well. And just all the guests that we had, shout out to Jared Blez. Dude, we had maybe 2 weeks to come up with that break. And it was incredible, man. So yeah. Just looking back at that, it was such a team effort. And man, I can't wait to get back to put my hard hat on and knock out another Fanatics Fest for you guys. But to jump into Fanatics Orlando, man, that's our card show. That's another area where we're looking to kind of take a huge leap into the collectible world, where Fanatics Fest was a third of that collectible side of our show, right? Well, this time it's about 90% of just pure buy, sell, and trade. 700 of the best dealers in the world, in the country. Some of them you guys know real well. Some of these guys have been on Hobby Hustle. And then there's other dealers out there that are well-known folks in the game. And there's some that are from the Southeast area that you guys may not know, but will know after Fanatics Collect Orlando. That's something that I always took prevalence in as a dealer, because I was once the guy that no one knew. And I've always been the guy that always had a chip on his shoulder. So I'm sure there's going to be dealers out there that's dude, I'd love to one day become so-and-so. I'd love to one day become this. And they get to be a part of this, and they get to be a part of something great. And that's something that we're very excited about. We have our partners in line, PSA, CGC, among others. There's going to be a ton of great activations. Tops will be there. The main stage will be back. It won't be as big as Fanatics Fest, but at the same time, it will be that trademark Fanatics style of things, and just making sure that we kind of put things in perspective, where, of course, yes, there's the hurricane that happened, and we're kind of looking at it as a perspective of let's make this a show where people look forward to the show. And this is something that ultimately has never happened in the Southeast, which is very surprising to me, right? Mm-hmm. But at the same time, this is something where we're looking to create this show and to ultimately get to other areas in the country that are underserved of card shows. So this is definitely a start to something great, and we're just very excited to be able to host this up for you guys.
Yeah, I think that's awesome. And I think it's really cool. And I think it's interesting that you frame it more as the card show, right? And so I guess just to clarify some of that, obviously Fanatics Fest was a ton of athletes and a ton of these experiences, and not that some of that won't be there, but it sounds like the focus is much more about the collector, the hobby, versus the WWE entrance walk and, Tom Brady walking around, and not that there's anything wrong with it, but
I will stop you there. We will have some stuff up our sleeves that revolves around that.
Okay.
That you see at any other card show.
That's all I'm trying to let's tease this out a little. Tease it out.
We have some good announcements. We have some good announcements in the pipeline. So it won't be your typical card show. It's still going to be a level above what you guys are used to.
Yeah.
But at the same time, you are right. It is going to be very collector focused. It is going to be,
cool.
And may I say too, it's not just going to be sports. We are going to kind of dive lightly into TCG and also some of the non-sports, as well as pops and other collectibles. I'm hoping to see a Hot Toys dealer. I'll make sure to make it worthwhile for you.
Otherwise, you'll just set up, EJ.
Yeah, I might as well set up too. It's look, shameless plug here. It's $350 a table, guys. I mean, that's a bargain compared to other shows. So,
I agree, especially with the marketing and stuff that you guys are putting behind it. I was on a podcast with Denny's Cards and a couple of the other dealers, and we were talking about that the price point for the Fanatics Collect Orlando is really, really awesome, for these guys compared to obviously a Fan Fest or something. So big props to you guys keeping it, affordable, right? It can make business sense. So that's cool.
Yeah.
So, we're starting to wind down. I don't want to take up too much more of your time, but I do want to get to a couple, I think, important things. Obviously you are in this position. You guys have had a couple really big successful events, the past couple months, obviously going into Orlando. But talk to me a little bit about what are your goals, for your division over the next 12, 24 months?
Man, that's a great question. Definitely getting more accustomed to working together and just kind of, again, at the end of the day, we're still a startup within Fanatics, right? Mm-hmm. So I'm just having a joy and just having a great time collaborating with my fellow coworkers. Again, like I said, man, I mean, these are the best of the best in the event space, right? So, I mean, I'm learning so much from my team and just getting a lot closer and just getting used to, again, we're only three shows in, right? So, but WWE World was such a great experience for our team. I mean, I just got closer to some of our team, getting to kind of get to know each other better is big. And then of course, Fanatics Fest was such a big coming out party for us as a team, as one, right? Yeah. Where we didn't necessarily have WWE as a partner or another partner at sorts. This was our own show. So, man, just looking forward to kind of getting better with our team and just progressing with our team, getting used to understanding better of how we're going to tackle our customer communications and just kind of building that well-oiled machine, not necessarily for the sense that it's going to be very much that same system overall, because look, we're looking to grow, we're looking to build, and I think that's my biggest goal personally, is looking to really just build up and get better. Because ultimately that's how you build great culture within companies, is just getting better overall, so that it in turn gets within the system of teamwork and whereas in my previous lives, and it includes Burbank as well, where it was just me, Jay, and a few others, right? This time I have a team to lean on where I have to get better at delegating. I have to get better at communicating. I have to get better at being very realistic whenever I can't do something. So I lean on a fellow coworker of mine. And that's something that I'm getting better at, man. I mean, every day it's still a learning curve. I mean, I'm still learning of how to progress things, even emails, man, like as little as emails, like how do I ultimately maximize this email in turn so that this thread isn't 50 threads over, right? So these are things that I'm always working on, man. So that's something that is definitely one of my goals, but ultimately as a team goal, we definitely want to keep innovating. We definitely want to keep leveling up the game. We definitely want to really provide an experience for that fan. Going back to the Newport days, where my goal was not to alienate anybody and just making it a more welcoming feel into the hobby. Yeah. That is our goal here, is to really provide that experience. It goes back to what I said, and I've said this before in previous interviews, is I remember when I had my first meeting with Lance as a team. It was like a team of three. There was only three of us there in our concrete jungle meeting room in New York. Yeah. And all I remember, Lance is known for his speeches, and Lance is known for being such a great motivator. And all I remember Lance said this, is that in everything that you do, in every meeting that you do, in every email that you send, in every post that you make, in everything that you do, in every hobby hustle that you're a part of, make sure you think of the fan, think of the collector. At the end of the day, we are not here because of ourselves. We are not here because of our merits. We're here because of that fan that bought a ticket, bought into our vision, that brought their families to the shows. And whatever it costs on a ticket, right? Whether that's $20 at Fanatics Collect Orlando, whether it's hundreds of dollars at Fanatics Fest, those 8 hours or those days that fan spends at the show, we want that to be very much memorable. Not in a sense of like, hey, let's just fill dealer tables and like, let's just kind of like let them be, but let's make sure it's memorable to where they would never forget it. And that till this day is ingrained in me, to where I think about it, where like in everything, and it's helped me so much in just the purpose of why we're here. Right. Yeah. And just in everything now, we don't just say yes to any sponsorship. We don't just say yes to any dealer. We don't just say yes to anyone. We make sure that at the end of the day, does this make sense for our fans? Does this make sense for our target market? Does it make sense for 2026 and 2027? Does it make sense for our team in general to scope up this work, right? Because at the end of the day, we aren't here because of we are not here because of our own merit. We're here because of the fan, because of the collector, because of the hobby. And that's something that I think about every day, man. And Zach, I'm just so grateful to be here. So grateful because at the end of the day, I'm here because of the hobby. I'm here because I was a big Kobe fan, and I wasn't here just because I want to make money and I want to do this. I'm forever grateful for this job because, dude, in turn, I get to do what I love every single day, and I get to provide for my family. That's incredible. But on the flip side of that, I get to serve a community that and I know is the best community on earth. It's the incredible side of the hobby that I wish more people get to talk about, because there's a lot of negativity also a part of that. Sure. But at the same time, on the flip side, there's even more positivity. There's even more relationships that are built, like you and I have built years back at Dallas. And I look back at that and I'm like, man, that goal of 10xing the hobby is so much more real to me than it was a few years back, because now I see it. Now I'm on the forefront of it, and now I get to see relationships. I get to meet dealers that I've never seen before. And these are people that ultimately trusted the hobby in turn. I'm looking forward to that moment where in about 10, 20, 30 years, where you and I are both old and gray, and we get to kind of look at that and be like, dude, I can't believe that we were a part of that. And man, I'm looking forward to that day.
That's awesome, man. Well, you guys, if these first few shows are like any sort of, setting the bar expectation, you're doing a heck of a job, man. So keep it up. And I think it's really cool that, you're you yourself and then the team as a whole, right? And that Fanatics as a brand is really trying to take that approach to put the focus on the collector. And I think that's going to be so important. I think that's going to resonate. And I think, like you said, sure, there's haters and everything else out there, but like at the end of the day, I do really feel that, it comes down to people like yourself talking. It's other people on your team that I've seen, through social media. It's Michael Rubin walking around at smaller shows like Burbank, like a Dallas, obviously the National is not small, but taking the time to stop and take pictures and talk to people, like I was blown away that he was just out and about and willing to do that. And again, just that love back to the collector, back to the community. I think that really is going to go a long way. EJ, this has been amazing, man. I appreciate you obviously taking time, but before I let you go, I ask all my guests, to sort of give anybody out there listening, what would be sort of that golden piece of advice that you'd give to either an aspiring collector or sort of an entrepreneur?
Oh man, greatest advice I ever got. There's no true formula for success. Shout out to my big bro, Jerron Smith.
Love that.
There's no true formula for success. It's going to be a bit of white. It's going to be a bit of black. It's going to be a this. It's going to be a that. It's going to be a bit of going hard. It's going to be a bit of falling back and kind of taking your time and looking back at things. But at the same time, you got to find that gray area. You got to find that area where what works for Zach may not work for EJ and vice versa, right? And every area is different, whether you're a card show promoter in Wisconsin, whether you're a card dealer in Delaware. Every tactic is different. Yes, look at inspiration. Yes, look at different ways to put different things into your arsenal. But at the same time, like, you want to be able to look at that and see what works for you and what doesn't work for you and kind of mix it up, because at the end of the day, there's a lot of people trying to follow the right, and there's a lot of people trying to figure out a new thing on the left side, right? But at the same time, your journey is different than everyone else. And as long as you're able to key into that gray area, I think that you're going to have your own success story. And that was probably the best advice I could give.
I love it, man. That's amazing advice and great words to live by. So before I let you go, can you tell the audience ticket information, where they can get stuff for the upcoming Fanatics Collect event in Orlando?
Yeah, thank you. By the way, Zach, thank you so much, man. Hobby Hustle is growing, and I'm really, really proud of you, dude. I can't wait to get back on episode 395.
Perfect. I will have you on anytime you want to come on, EJ.
Yeah, go to pencil me in on that front. But overall, guys, make sure you guys check me out. Dynasty.ej. Check us out at Fanatics Events. Fanatics Collect Orlando. Make sure you guys check us out. Grab a ticket. There's a few dealer booths left, so make sure you guys hit me up on that front. But beyond that, guys, try us out. If you guys have never been to a Fanatics event show, man, we're changing the game here. So if there's anything that I could do to help sway you, please let me know. I'm here to help.
That's awesome, man. Well, thank you. EJ, like I said, this has just been a great conversation, man. Your story is amazing and like so inspiring, truly from sort of starting small as a passion into making it a business, into growing that business, and now sitting where you're at. So congrats on all your success, and I'm just really excited to see you continue to grow and see where, you know, Fanatics not only takes you, but, you know, takes this hobby as a whole. So best of luck. And I really appreciate you taking time to come on today.
Thanks, Zach. Appreciate it, man. We'll talk soon.
All right, buddy. You be well. Everyone out there watching, thank you so much for your time. I hope that you learned something new or found some inspiration. If you enjoyed the show, please be sure to like, share, subscribe, and of course, share with your friends. That is so important to help let others sort of find out about this. And I love telling the stories of all these amazing people in the collectible space. So hopefully you'll help other people find out about this show. So remember, keep collecting, keep hustling, and we'll see you next week on Hobby Hustle, where business passion and collecting collide. Thanks so much for watching.
Hobby Hustle is brought to you by Collector Creative. If you're a collectible brand or company looking for help with marketing, branding, design, or development, head over to collectorcreative.com and drop Zach a line. We'll be back next week. In the meantime, connect with us on Instagram, TikTok, and YouTube at collector_creative. And be sure to like and subscribe so you never miss an episode. We'll see you next time on Hobby Hustle, where collecting passion and business collide.